20 mankind's inventions or creations. Number 1. The airplane. A glider, which is a non-motorized flying machine, was the first airplane that was flown. This first glider was not flown by passengers or a pilot because it was too small and could not fit anyone in it. The airplane was invented on December 17, 1903 by Orville and Wilbur Wright. They were best known as the Wright brothers. They said, "Flight is possible for men." They were working in a bicycle shop when they got interested in flying. They learned that bicycles that were closer to the ground were faster. Then they began building gliders near North Carolina. After the Wright brothers improved the glider, they became the first people to successfully fly a plane with a person in it. The plane flew 120 feet and flew only about 12 seconds. In 1908, the Wright brothers finally made a plane that could fly for more than 1.5 hours. Number 2. The microwave oven. The microwave oven was discovered by accident. It was called the Radar Range, which was the first microwave oven to go on the market. It was roughly as large and heavy as a refrigerator. The idea of using microwave energy to cook food was accidentally found by Pierce LeBaron Spencer when he experimented the radar waves had melted a candy bar in his pocket. Experiments showed that microwave sharing could raise the internal temperature of many foods far more rapidly than a conventional oven. Number 3. The piano. The piano was invented by Bartolomeo Cristofori in Florence, Italy. When he built his first piano is not entirely clear, but Francesco Manucci wrote in his diary that Cristofori was working on a harpsichord that plays both softly and loudly as early as 1698. All of his surviving instruments date from the 1720s. 20 pianofortes were built by Cristofori before he died at age 75, roughly 21 years after he invented the first pianoforte. The piano was founded on earlier technological innovations. In particular, it benefited from centuries of work on the harpsichord, which had shown the most effective ways to construct the case, the soundboard, the bridge, and the keyboard. Cristofori's early instruments were made with thin clavichord strings and were much quieter than the modern piano. However, they could produce a wider range of dynamics than the clavichord and the sound sustained longer. Number 4. The penicillin. Penicillin is one of the earliest discovered and widely used antibiotic agents derived from the penicillin mold. It was discovered by Alexander Fleming, who was born on August 6, 1881 in Davos, Scotland. Before he discovered it, it was originally noticed by a French medical student, Ernest Duchens, in 1896. When Fleming discovered it, he was working at St. Mary's Hospital in London in 1928. So he rediscovered it. At the beginning, a plague culture of Staphylococcus was contaminated by a blue-green mold, and that colonies of bacteria adjacent to the mold were dissolved. Curious, Alexander Fleming grew the mold in a pure culture and found that it produced a substance that killed a number of disease-causing bacteria. The substance, which was named penicillin, had a great therapeutic value. The results of this investigation were published in 1929, and Dr. Fleming noticed that penicillin could be produced in quantity to improve its value. Number 5. X-rays. They were accidentally discovered by Wilhelm Conrad on 8 November 1895. He discovered an image cast from his Castle ray generator projected far beyond the possible range of the cathode rays, now known as an electron beam. Further investigations showed that the rays were generated at the point of contact of the cathode ray beam on the interior of the vacuum tube, that they were not deflected by magnetic fields, and they penetrated many kinds of matter. After his discovery, Röntgen took an X-ray photograph of his wife's hand, which clearly revealed her wedding ring and her bones. Medical X-rays were produced by letting a stream of fast electrons come to a sudden stop at a metal plate. It was believed that X-rays emitted by the sun or stars also come from fast electrons. The images which are produced by X-rays are due to the different absorption rates of different tissues. Calcium in bones absorbs X-rays the most, so bones look white on a film recording of the X-ray image called a radiograph. Fat and other tissues absorb less and look gray. Air absorbs the least, so lungs look black on a radiograph. Number 6. Genes. Levi Strauss, a 24-year-old German immigrant, left New York for San Francisco with the intention of opening a branch of his brother's New York dry goods business. He, who was an astute merchant in San Francisco, responded to the gold rush need for South miner's clothes. Shortly after his arrival, a prospector wanted to know what Mr. Levi Strauss was selling. He had rough canvas to use for tents and wagon covers, but the prospector wanted a pair of pants strong enough to last. As soon as he heard this, he made overalls. The overalls were made of canvas that liked to miners, but complained that they tended to chafe. The material were substituted by a twilled cotton cloth from France called serge de Nîmes. They were cheap and they felt good. In 1873, Levi Strauss and Company began using the pocket stitch design. They were nicknamed jeans after the city of Genoa, where sailors wore cotton canvas. Number 7. The sandwich. Sandwiches existed long before they were named this way, and the first sandwich seems to have appeared 100 years before Christ, during the Easter fasting, when a rabbi thought about eating matzah, some kind of ancient bread, with apple slices and nuts. The first time it was named sandwich was back in 1726, when the inventor of the sandwich, John Montague, the fourth Earl of Sandwich, who was a heavy gambler and was spending endless hours playing cards, kept asking for bread, cheese, and meat. Because he kept the cards in one hand, he had to use the other one to eat, so he thought about placing the cheese and the meat between the slices of bread. The other players saw the Earl's invention and started asking about the same type of food, calling it sandwich. In 1827, sandwiches were introduced in cooking books, and by 1900 they were already famous in the United States. Number 8. The umbrella. The basic umbrella was invented over 4,000 years ago. We have seen evidence of umbrellas in the ancient art and artifacts of Egypt, Assyria, Greece, and China. These ancient umbrellas or parasols were first designed to provide shade from the sun. The Chinese were the first to waterproof their umbrellas for use as rain protection. They waxed and laked their parasols in order to use them for rain. Starting in the 16th century, the umbrella became popular to the Western world, especially in the rainy weather of Northern Europe. At first, it was considered only an accessory suitable for women. Then the Persian traveler and writer Jonas Hemingway carried and used an umbrella publicly in England for 30 years. He popularized umbrella use among men. The first old umbrella shop was called James Smith and Sons. The shop opened in 1830 and it is still located at 53 New Oxford Street in London, England. Number 9. The telephone. It was designed by two inventors, Elisha Gray and Alexander Graham Bell. Both independently designed devices that could transmit speech electrically, and the telephone was born. Also, the Graham Bell's telephone was patented at first. Both men rushed their respective designs to the patent office within hours of each other. Elisha Gray and Alexander Graham Bell entered into a famous legal battle over the invention of the telephone, which Bell won. The telegraph was improved with telephone. The telegraph and telephone are both wire-based electrical systems. When Bell began experimenting with electrical signals, the telegraph had been an established means of communication for some 30 years. Number 10. The sneakers. The first rubber sole shoes called plimsolls were developed and manufactured in the United States in the late 1800s. In 1892, 9 small rubber manufacturing companies consolidated to form the U.S. Rubber Company. Among them was the Goodyear Metallic Rubber Shoe Company, organized in the 1840s in Naugatuck, Connecticut. This company was the first licensee of a new manufacturing process called vulcanization, discovered and patented by Charles Goodyear. Number 11. The refrigerator. Snow and ice, cool streams, springs, caves, and cellars were long ago used to refrigerate food. Meat and fish were preserved in warm weather by salting or smoking. At the beginning of the 19th century, ice boxes were used in England. Natural ice was harvested, distributed, and used in both commercial and home applications in the mid-1800s. The ice trade between Boston and the South was one of the first casualties of the Civil War. Wooden boxes lined with tin or zinc and insulated with various materials including cork, sawdust, and suet were used to hold blocks of ice and refrigerate food. A great pan collected the melt water and had to be emptied daily. Pioneers in refrigerating included Dr. William Cullen, a Scotsman whose stories in the early 1700s dealt with the evaporation of liquids in a vacuum. Michael Faraday, a Londoner who in the early 1800s liquefied ammonia to cause cooling, and Dr. John Gurry at Apalachicola, Florida, who built a machine to make ice to cool the air for yellow fever patients in 1834. Today's compression refrigerating system operates on a concept adapted from Faraday's experiments. It involves compression gas into a liquid which will then absorb heat. In so doing, returns to gas. This is a simplified description of what happens in a home refrigerator, freezer, or air conditioner. Number 12. The incandescent light bulb. The first electric light was invented by Henry Davy, an English chemist. Davy connected two wires to a battery and attached a charcoal strip between the other ends of the wires. The charged carbon glowed, making the first arc lamp, long before Thomas Edison patented first in 1879 and then a year later in 1880 and began commercializing his incandescent light bulb. British inventors were demonstrating that electric light was possible with the arc lamp. In 1835, the first constant electric light was demonstrated, and for the next 40 years, scientists around the world worked on the incandescent lamp, tinkering with the filaments, the part of the bulb that produced light when heated by an electrical current, and the bulb's atmosphere, whether air is vacuumed out of the bulb, or it is filled with an inert gas to prevent the filament from oxidizing and burning out. These early bulbs had extremely short lifespans, were too expensive to produce or used too much energy. When Edison and his researchers at Menlo Park came onto the lighting scene, they focused on improving the filament, first testing carbon, then platinum, before finally returning to a carbon filament. Number 13. Pizza. Considered a peasant's meal in Italy for centuries, we cannot say who invented the very first pizza pie. Food historians agree that pizza-like dishes were eaten by many peoples in the Mediterranean, including the Greeks and Egyptians. In 1889, Esposito, who owned a restaurant called the Pizzeria di Pietro, baked what he called pizza, especially for the visit of Italian King Umberto I and Queen Margherita. The first pizzeria in North America was opened in 1905 by Gennaro Lombardi at Spring Street in New York City. The first Pizza Hut, a chain of pizza restaurants, appeared in the United States during the 1930s. Frozen pizza was invented by Rose Tartini. Number 14. Aspirin. Aspirin was first produced 110 years ago, but the natural form, salicylic acid, found in plants has been used for thousands of years. As early as 3000 BC, the ancient Egyptians used willow bark and myrtle to reduce pain and fever. By 30 AD, Greek and Roman physicians suggested the use of willow leaf to treat inflammation. The natural form of aspirin, salicylic acid, was associated with an awful taste and often induced upset stomach and vomiting. In 1853, scientific Charles Frederick Gerard was the first to prepare ASA by the addition of an azoteric chemical to natural salicylic acid. However, this form was said to be unstable. In 1897, Felix Hoffmann, a young chemist working for Bayer, independently made ASA in a more chemically pure, stable, and more palatable form. Hoffmann's father had utilized sodium salicylic for rheumatic pain to make it easier on the stomach. 2 years later, on March 6, 1899, aspirin was trademarked under the Imperial Office of Berlin. Number 15. Television. Television was not invented by a single inventor. Instead, many people working together and alone over the years contributed to the evolution of television. At the dawn of television history, there were two distinct paths of technology experimented with by researchers. Early inventors attempted to either build a mechanical television system based on the technology of Paul Nichols' rotating discs, or they attempted to build an electronic television system using a cathode ray tube developed independently in 1907 by English inventor Campbell Swinton and Russian scientist Boris Rosin. Number 16. Microphone. A microphone is a device for converting acoustic power into electric power that has essentially similar wave characteristics. Microphones convert sound waves into electrical voltages that are eventually converted back into sound waves through speakers. They were first used with early telephones and then radio transmitters. In 1827, Sir Charles Weston was the first person to coin the phrase microphone. In 1876, Emil Berliner invented the first microphone used as a telephone voice transmitter. At the U.S. Centennial Exposition, Emil Berliner had seen a Bell Company telephone demonstrated and was inspired to find ways to improve the newly invented telephone. The Bell Telephone Company was impressed with what the inventor came up with and bought Berliner's microphone patent. In 1878, the carbon microphone was invented by David Edward Hughes and later developed during the 1920s. Hughes's microphone was the early model for the various carbon microphones now in use. Number 17. Internet. Before there was the public Internet, there was the Internet's forerunner, ARPANET or Advanced Research Projects Agency Network. ARPANET was founded by the United States military after the Cold War with the aim of having a military command and control center that could withstand nuclear attack. The point was to distribute information between geographically dispersed computers. ARPANET created the TCP/IP communications standard, which defines data transfer on the Internet today. The ARPANET opened in 1969 and was quickly usurped by civilian computer nerds who had now found a way to share the few great computers that existed at that time. Number 18. Rubik's Cube. Ernest Rubik was born in Budapest, Hungary during World War II. His father was an engineer who designed gliders and his mother was an artist and a poetess. Rubik combined the divergent talents of his parents to become both a sculptor and an architect. Fascinated with the concept of space, Rubik spent his free time while working as a professor at the Academy of Applied Arts and Design in Budapest, designing puzzles that would make his students think in new ways about three-dimensional geometry. In the spring of 1974, just shy of his 30th birthday, Rubik envisioned a small cube with each side constructed of malleable squares. By the fall of 1974, his friends had helped him create the first wooden model of his idea. At first, Rubik just enjoyed watching how the squares moved as he turned one section and then another. However, when he attempted to put the colors back again, he ran into difficulty. Rubik spent a month turning the cube this way and that way until he finally realigned the colors. When he handed other people the cube and they too had the same fascinating reaction, he realized he might have a fun-type puzzle on his hands. Number 19. Jigsaw puzzle. Englishman John Spielberg invented the jigsaw puzzle in 1767. Spielberg was an engraver and map maker. The first jigsaw puzzle was a map of the world. Spielberg attached a map to a piece of wood and then cut out each country. Teachers used Spielberg's puzzles to teach geography, and students learned their geography lessons by putting the world maps back together. It is generally agreed that the first jigsaw puzzle was produced around 1760 by John Spielberg. Number 20. Hopscotch. Hopscotch is rumored to have been invented by the Romans in order to train their armies. However, some claim that the Chinese created the game. Indeed, with all these theories, the earliest recorded reference to hopscotch was in 1677. The game was titled Scotch Hoppers by Poor Robin's Almanac in 1707 and was an all-boys game. But there are many different names for hopscotch, including hopscotch in Yorkshire, Scotch hobby in Suffolk, where boys would hold another boy on their back while hopping through the course, and in North Britain, beavers or pavats. In India, it is called taps.